How's everybody doing today? Apparently enjoying breakfast and conversation. Okay, everybody, to attention please, because now we are in day 2 of the give you as much content as you can possibly stand. In other words, welcome to day 2 of the conference. Hope you all enjoyed Monday Night Football last night. Hey! If my colleague Janet Ginsburg were here, I would burst into a rendition of Fly Eagles Fly just to embarrass her, but she's not, so you're spared. We could do an Eagles chant. No, all right. So I want to start this morning by thanking a lot of folks who made this event happen, who do not get the same visibility as Rebecca and Maurice and I do, because obviously this event took the work of many people to put together. And I want to start by thanking some of our more junior colleagues who do a lot of the work and don't necessarily get to stand up in front of you. So when I say your name, please indicate who you are so people know. From the National Employment Law Project, we have Beth Avery. And Phil Hernandez. My colleague Jamie Gullen is helping out with one of the breakouts this morning. I don't see Jamie, but we will acknowledge Jamie anyway. Jamie is part of our National Clean Slate Clearinghouse team. If anyone here is not on the listserv that we have for the National Clean Slate Clearinghouse and you do expungement or record clearing work, you probably ought to be on that list, so make sure I know to add you. Also in absentia is Michael Hollander from my office, who, along with Zara Minon of CAP, helped put together the Clean Slate Clearinghouse, that's in, the Clean Slate Toolkit that's in your materials. Mike was on vacation, and I'm sad about that because he has done a lot of work on this project and has helped us quite a bit. Events team and logistics. Obviously, there have been a lot of logistics involving this event. And the folks at CAP have been terrific about that. I want to thank Anusha Ravi for doing a lot of the work with the scholarships. Many of you have interfaced with her. Shannon Kennedy has run the logistics of this event for the events team, and it's gone really well, I think. Unusually well, in my experience, for these conferences. Antoine, Jordan, Constance, Torian, thanks to anyone at CAP I've forgotten to mention. I know there have been a lot of folks who contributed to make this work. On the grant side, Rajani Frederick did a lot to help us look at the many, many terrific proposals that were submitted for Kellogg funding, and we appreciate that. And I would thank the advisory committee also that we have with the Kellogg project, who also gave us feedback on what to do with this event. And then finally, the materials that you found in your blue packet, you can also find online. The National Employment Law Project is putting it on your website, correct, Maurice? Anything more to say about that, about where to find it?
It'll take a little while, but y'all will get an email with all the materials.
And CAP is putting the video of the event on its site. So when you want to relive the highlights of this, like my moderation, for instance, you can go there. Okay, with no further ado, we have a wonderful session to kick off today. Bill Cobb just said this is the Hell Yes panel, so I think that means it's going to be all right. So with no further ado, I will invite to the stage the panelists for lived experiences defining the advocacy agenda, and let them introduce themselves. Yeah, why not?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Who did that yesterday? Jasmine? And then did it again. Good morning, everybody. And I think the second one was really for me, not for y'all. I am Megan French-Marslin. I am working title, a working future fair hiring coordinator for Just Leadership USA. You heard from my esteemed boss, Glenn Martin, yesterday. And I have the pleasure of being the moderator for the Hell Yes panel. We're just going to coin that, TM it. And I think I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. And both of you have incredible stories to tell. And I'd like you to think about putting those stories into the context of the work that you're doing now and the particular advocacy issues that you have taken up over the course of your careers. So Teresa, you want to start?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's really exciting to be here, be in a room with practitioners, people doing amazing work around the country. My name is Teresa Hodge. I'm one of the co-founders of Mission Launch. For those who said in one of the breakout sessions, my daughter Lauren Hodge spoke yesterday. She and I co-founded Mission Launch. Mission Launch is kind of the culmination, I guess, of our lived experience of mass incarceration. About 18 years ago, I came in contact with the criminal justice system. I was a business owner, and my co-defendant and I, he was my business partner then, our name, now we refer to each other as co-defendants, but at the time, our company was investigated. And when it was investigated, I went to trial to defend myself and the company. He did the same. In the end, we ended up with 17 years and 3 months together. He had 10 years sentence, and I had a 7-year, 3 months, 87-month prison sentence. So I am that face when we talk about white-collar, nonviolent, first-time offense. And I don't say that to differentiate myself from the rest of the population, because like everyone else, I believe that if we're going to reform, if we're going to bring about opportunities, we have to include everybody. But, often people think, oh, white-collar people get a year and a day. No, I got 7 years, 3 months. So, I put that out there. Prior to that, I was a business person. I was an entrepreneur. I also, at one point in my career, was an HR professional, where I often tell people, we were trained to discriminate. We were trained we want to apply, we want to advertise a job. And my job was to drill it down to the top 5 candidates and to find every reason possible to eliminate folks. So now fast forward, and I'm on the other side of this application process. For me, the work that I'm doing now, it's definitely informed by the fact that I was a business person, my ability to hire once upon a time, and then going to prison, and then understanding that today, many HR professionals, many decision makers, they don't know how to interpret the criminal background check, and they don't know how to interpret me. So on my days when I'm being compassionate, that's how I feel about it. That I get. I get that it's difficult because of what we hear and see in the media about individuals who have arrest or conviction records. I get it because we've made this process so scary, and we've othered the heck out of those of us who have arrest or conviction records. And like Bill said, we've made it so impossible that when we come home from prison, that the prison sentence continues. I did not romanticize while I was in prison how challenging it was going to be to come home. But in my worst imagination, I never perceived it would be as difficult, as challenging as it is today. And I only have one band-the-box story. And I tell it because, I can't even imagine people who year after year after year try to apply for a job and get rejected. I went to prison as a business person, a social entrepreneur. So when I came home, I knew I had the capacity to reinvent my life. I had the resources, I had the support network to do it. I applied for a job. I had a job, first of all, when I left prison. A friend of mine, he offered me a job. I was a paralegal when I first came home for 2 years. He knew and I knew that I wanted to start this business, but I also knew that I just couldn't come home and start it because I had to totally rebuild my life. I didn't have the resources to start it with. So I needed the foundation of a job. But as I was beginning to transition out of that job, I applied for a job online. And it was working from home, using your computer, your internet, to do some back office support work for a corporation. And so I went and I was applying for the job. A friend of mine said, hey, I think this will be perfect while you start Mission Launch. I said, okay. I put in my name, my address, very basic demographic information. And then the question appeared, have you ever been convicted of a crime? So I exhaled and I thought, okay, here we go, first time. And after I checked the box and was honest, the screen went black. And what appeared next was, something you said disqualified you. Now, unless they really just don't like people named Teresa, I knew that it was the fact that I had a conviction and I was honest about that. And I made a decision that I would never apply for a job again, that I would create a job for myself, I would create opportunities for other people, because for me, I didn't have the emotional courage to go through that. What I was dealing with, trying to come home and put my life together, was enough. I did not need the constant reminder and the rejection over and over as I was trying to apply for jobs. So today, that's kind of what informs the work that I do. I am on a mission to create pathways of opportunities for people who have arrested convictions, to lend my face, to lend my voice to this, to show that we have capacity, that we have abilities, that not all of us have to go home and work at Walmart. You know, we're grateful for Walmart hiring or McDonald's, but we have ability to run corporations. We have abilities to sit on boards. We have abilities to do a variety of things. I'm building a piece of tech right now that I hope to launch next year. And again, it's pushing the boundaries of who we are. Prison is a microcosm of the United States. If you want to know who goes to prison, it's everybody. Yeah. It's not a particular person. And so when we think of solutions, we have to think of solutions that meet your need. When you think of a solution for them, think of a solution for you. Because what you need is what someone else needs.
Thank you. Tara?
Hell yes.
Hell yes, Bill.
Well, it's super hard to follow that. I'm so grateful to be here today and to be in all of your company. My name is Tara Simmons, and I am also coming home from a prison sentence 4 years ago. I grew up in poverty, and every single person in my family has suffered with substance use disorder, and most of the people in my family have been incarcerated. I became a mom at 14 years old. I left home at 13, and somehow I was able to pull my life together and go on and graduate college at 21 and become a registered nurse. But you know, in my early childhood, I suffered a lot of different trauma, and I never sufficiently dealt with that. And so later on in my life, when my father passed away, I was going through a lot of different emotions, depression, and I ended up becoming an addict myself. And so I ended up going to prison for delivery of a small amount of drugs. And when I was released, you know, I mean, prison is already more traumatizing. But when I was released, I was able to keep my RN license because they saw that I had substance use disorder and that was treatable. But I couldn't find a job. Like Teresa said, you know, I actually got into interviews, and one of the jobs I applied for was working from home as a telephone nurse consultant. And I had actually done that before. You know, I don't have any access to drugs, I don't have any access to patients. And I got to an interview, and then I disclosed, you know, what I had gone through. And of course, they rescinded any hope for that position. And so I was working at Burger King with a bachelor's degree and an RN license. And I had so many legal barriers I was facing. You know, I had court debt that had, I was imposed $6,100, but with the interest, I'd come out owing $7,600. I had a family law case. My home had been foreclosed on while I was in prison, and I was being evicted from it. And I had a variety of legal issues on top of the economic issues and the family reconciliation issues and just trying to get your life back together. And I was around, so many other people experiencing these problems too. And I decided I was going to go to law school and figure out how to change the system for myself and everybody else. And I didn't know that there was so many advocates like you already working on these issues. And it was really naive. I thought, I'm going to just figure this out and I'm going to fix it. And I thought it would be that easy. And I started law school in 2014, and I graduated in May. And when I graduated, magna cum laude with the Dean's Medal, and with all of these honors and recognitions, and a Skadden Fellowship, which some of you might know what that is. I was the first directly impacted person to get a Skadden Fellowship, also first from my school. And then I go to take the bar exam, and they say, no, you can't do that. You have a criminal record. And so, I started my fellowship about 2 months ago, and it's right now it's a fight to get admitted to the bar, honestly. But it's also doing the work I've been doing throughout my law school journey, and that is I developed a nonprofit called Civil Survival, and we are directly impacted people advocating for systemic policy change. So we work on a variety of issues, whether it's ban the box for employment, LFO reform, recently in the city of Seattle, they banned the box for housing. And right now I am gearing up for the legislative session because I think it goes beyond the box. And like I said, I got through an interview and then still was declined, and there's no logical reason why I couldn't work from home as a nurse. And just so many other areas, I can't ever volunteer in my kids' school because of my criminal record. I mean, there's, all the collateral consequences that we all know about. I think it goes beyond the box. And so really, and I appreciate the clean slate efforts by Center for American Progress, but what I'm proposing in my state right now is to increase felony vacates. I think that the research supports it. So I just really am gearing up right now for the legislative session in Washington State to increase our felony vacate statute and make even violent crimes, sex crimes at the discretion of a judge. A judge should be able to see people's rehabilitative efforts and guide that by data and research that shows that after so many years, people are as likely to reoffend as anybody else in the community. And so that's what I'm doing right now, and I appreciate being here. So.
So some of you know this, but in a former lifetime, I was a historian. And my work focused on New Orleans in the 1970s, and this mayor who got elected on the idea that he was going to bring the community into the process of low-income community development. And very, very quickly, it turned out that was not what he was going to do. He was going to build hotels, which is another story altogether. But when community leadership got in his face about it, he said, remember, you're advisors, not decision makers. And I think that's been a conversation that we've been having over the past 2 days of what does it actually look like? You are the true stakeholders in this fight to reform the criminal justice system. And as Bill said yesterday, and is the Jail USA motto, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. Can you talk about some of the barriers to advocacy spaces and policy rooms that have affected the way that you can do the work?
Well, I think the other part of that statement that
furthest from the resources.
Furthest from the resources. You gotta add that part. And then you really begin to bring into what it's like to do this work, to have the lived experience, to believe that you also have solutions that are valuable and information that needs to be heard. We sit in rooms often where we're listening to a solution and we see the hole, we see the blind spot, because there's nothing like the lived experience of incarceration to allow you to really get it. I once had a gentleman who was trying to raise a whole bunch of money, I think because he saw potentially the opportunity of working and creating innovative solutions for this population. And so what he said was, I just want to pick your brain. And I said, well, I don't think I can transfer what you want. I said, I think for you to get what I got, you have to go to prison. And I don't think you really want to do that. Because, and I don't say that to be funny, it's the truth. I could have never, in my wildest imagination, conceived. Like, I have a walking body of knowledge. I don't even know why I know all the stuff I know. But it's because I saw it. I heard it. You know, I remember stories, and I met people. I can put a real face to a problem that somebody's telling me, even if I don't have that direct lived experience. I can think, oh, that's Janice. When she was going through this and she said this, you know, and I can kind of play that out and think, okay. And because I am a strategic thinker, naturally, I can role play all of that out. So I think that one of the things that's important is that the resources have to come to the table to organizations that are also ran by directly impacted people. I have an organization, Tara has an organization, Glenn has an organization, and you know, we also have to become stakeholders that are not just in organizations as a token, but that we are at every level that are on boards. We are, you know, part of the C-suite team. We are, you know, program managers, whatever. But that we're, you know, it's great that organizations are bringing a person into their organization. What percentage of your organization, if this is a population that you're working on, what percentage, you know, of your employment are directly impacted people, and what role do they play? Do they really have a voice? Are they a real stakeholder? You know, so I think that, you know, that's one of the things for me. The hard part is I created my own table because I just felt like the solution, the innovation, you know, when I came home and I looked at what was happening in the DC, Baltimore area, I felt like I could add value. And I felt like, and I researched, I didn't want to do what other people were doing. I wanted to support the work that other folks were doing. But I also felt like there's some gaps. And the biggest gap was there was not enough resources for me and for a person like me, because I am not the typical face that goes to prison, and therefore there are not solutions for me. And I began to create solutions for me and the thousands of women that I met who were just like me, who also needed this. But I also created solutions for some of the women who weren't like me, but if they had that pathway, if the road extended further, they would take that extra step and they would realize their full potential, the potential that they didn't have an opportunity for whatever reason to realize before they went to prison.
So I think Teresa, I'm going to kick this to you, Tara, but with a little add-on. I think Teresa brings up a really important point of the way that all of the organizations that are in the room and that have been here over the last day and a half need to begin to think about how they do this work, right? And there is a difference between paying lip service or tokenizing by bringing someone in at the end to be the face of a project and having formally incarcerated and impacted leadership at every step of the process. And because you are now in the legal world and hopefully in 2 weeks you will be, pray for her, y'all. She's got a Supreme Court case coming up. But can you talk about the barriers for you in terms of the policy spaces and legal spaces that you work in and how you've begun to shift them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with everything that Teresa said, and that is, you know, we've had to like create our own tables because, you know, where I'm at, there's a lot of different organizations doing work on behalf of us, and none of them employ us. Like, I don't know any other directly impacted lawyer or, you know, directly impacted advocate working in the organizations in my area. So what I have had to do is develop my own organization so I can really be involved in the advocacy, because there are some coalitions, you know, that allow us to come and be a part of, but really the power is vested in the people who are leading that coalition, the lawyers. And so that's why I went to law school, is so I could also become a lawyer and understand and lead my own efforts. And there, you know, I don't know what else I was supposed to, what was the question? I'm sorry. But basically that's it. That's why I, you know, went to law school, is because I want to be able to be the leader for these issues. And so I do think, and I was joking with Maurice when we talked, and I said, you know, you can just hire me. That's what you can do to solve the problem. And Maurice is absolutely the model of a person who is doing this work, who really should be held up, and people should look up to him, because, you know, he actually does engage with the community as more than anybody else I've seen. He reached out to me recently through email asking about my opinion on a occupational licensing issue or policy. You know, he absolutely does engage with the community, so I really appreciate that. And Nick Allen back there at Columbia Legal Services too, he's from Seattle where I'm at, and he actually goes to the prisons, he goes to the community meetings. He actually, you know, takes his leadership from the community, and I really appreciate advocates like that. And I'm sure all of you are doing that too, so. But if you're not, you know, make sure you're going, make sure at the very minimum that you're actually going to the people who are impacted in their communities, not asking them to come to your office at 3 o'clock on a Friday because they're not going to make it. But we have barriers to coming to your table. Come to our table. And I would encourage all of you and push you forward to actually hire people and put them in positions of leadership within your organization. They don't even need a law degree. You know, people like Teresa said, we have this experience and we have so much to offer, and it's intuitive to us because we've walked this journey, and it's invaluable to your advocacy. You're going to be missing something, and the best way to actually learn from us is to employ us.
So you
At a fair, livable wage.
Yes.
right, with social mobility. But you actually teed up a question that I'm going to ask you to imagine, both of you to imagine what criminal justice advocacy reform would look like if it was driven and led by formerly incarcerated leadership at every step of the way.
I think I kind of hinted at that already when I said that, you know, with the number of people who have an arrest or conviction record, we should be in the front. And this is our movement. You know, we need enablers, we need allies, we need support, but this is our fight. You know, every day when you come home from prison, you are fighting to live. You are fighting to survive. You are fighting to rebuild our lives. And if we are allowed to fight for ourselves, we will have agency. I think that's the one thing that this population needs more than anything. We need to feel like we belong to this America again. You know, like I hate the term returning citizens, because where did I go? Where am I? I am a part of this America, and as Bill stated yesterday, when my prison sentence ended, I accepted responsibility, and when the sentence was over, it was over. And so it is time for us to lead, to be a part of this. But I think it's about what does justice feel like, not look like. Because we all know when we've been wronged, and it's a feeling attached to it. When you know someone has done you wrong or something has happened. And so we will know that we have a just system when we all feel better about the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, what was the question? I'm sorry.
What does justice look like?
Oh, what does justice look like? Yes.
And in particular, I mean, because this room is filled with criminal justice advocacy organizations. And why I said you teed me up nicely was because of your call for organizations to engage in meaningful and organic and authentic ways rather than lip service ways with impacted leadership. Tell me what that looks like.
Well, like I said, hire us. I mean, and put resources in our organizations. Become partners with us, ally with us, actually empower us. you know, because it is a lot of a feeling thing, like she said. I've been oppressed. I constantly go through life every single day carrying the anxiety and fear of being a permanent underclass. And the judge didn't sentence me to a lifetime of homelessness and unemployment, but that's what I carry every single day. So naturally it comes with that some anxiety and fear and some distrust of people who aren't experiencing that, you know. So when you encounter us and you're advocating on behalf of us, you have to understand all of that, and you have to extend grace and patience and take purposefully, purposefully like elevate us in opportunities and in spaces like this, you know, where we can share our experiences, because that's healing, and that's what justice is healing. And we should all be investing in more resources for people coming out. A lot of us have been victims before we were ever incarcerated. So there's a lot of different resources and services that we need. And that's just not happening. Organizations think that they know the solution and they're just gonna go after it and not really think and be attentive to the real needs of the community that they're serving.
What does culture change look like? I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about at Just Leadership and with regard to this particular field is that while incremental reform must happen and will happen, culture change is system change. The fight to win hearts and minds is a critical part of the work that we're doing and the work that y'all are doing. Talk about that.
Well, again, if we just look at the data, 1 in 3 Americans have an arrest or conviction record. It has to stop being our dirty little secret. Mm-hmm. It has to stop being the family member's dirty little secret. When I came home from prison, my mother, well-intended, you know, couldn't understand why I wanted to talk about the fact that I had been to prison. You know, and a lot of women, we have an opportunity to go back to maiden names, get married, kind of, you know, switch our identity a little bit legally. But I didn't want to do that. And she didn't understand it, and I said to her, this consumed almost 1/3 of my life. Tell me what part of 1/3 of your life do you not want to discuss? And I said it with respect, and she understood. You know, today, you know, if she could, she would put me on her shoulder and say, that's my girl. But it's because I stood up for myself, and I spoke for myself. You know, and it cannot be our dirty secret. We have got to make it where it's not the family shame as well. And the moment when we do that, the culture begins to shift. Mm-hmm. Because I am one person, but I come from a community of a lot of people. And today I've given them an ability to tell their story, to talk about their sister, to talk about their pain of what it was like for my 4 sisters, my mom, and my daughter to drive me to prison, not knowing if any of us were going to see each other free again, you know, on the other side. In that 5-year, you know, time period, anything could have happened to any one of us, you know. Yeah. So I free them by telling my story, and we need to free the millions of families that are in bondage because of this.
Absolutely, and I'm just gonna add one more thing, and then I'm looking at. So, Glenn was on a panel yesterday, and he talked a lot about vocabulary. And the importance in changing language. And yet after that, and this is not to call anybody out in the room, but after that, people slipstream back into ex-offender, ex-con very easily. And this is a room of the most progressive thinkers in criminal justice reform. And can you talk about the specifics around language and the ways, you know, you talked about family, you talk about the way that we need to change the way the public persona of people with criminal convictions and arrest records.
Yeah, that's kind of funny that you bring that up, because just this last week, and I don't know if I'm just a little oversensitive right now because of my bar issue, but I got an email from the Department of Corrections in Washington State, and it says, we have a community partner that's looking for an offender to come do a talk. And you're appointed by the governor to the reentry council, and we thought you would be a great person. And my response to that was, sorry, I don't know any offenders. I only know people who have experienced reentry and have had to overcome a tremendous amount of barriers while doing so. Basically, I'm not coming to do your talk, because you're not going to tokenize me, ask me to volunteer my time, and then call me an offender. They need to learn a lesson, right? And, and on top of that, about a year and a half ago, the Department of Corrections put out a new policy that they were going to start referring to us as people first. I don't even, and the thing about changing the culture, like you talked about, it goes beyond just me and Teresa. There is, a variety of people with different experiences in the criminal justice system. The 100 million, we're not all going to be like-minded. And what really gets to me is when I'm in advocacy circles and other people with sex offenses, and they call them sex offenders. And that's still appropriate, and that's still, in some circles, acceptable. And it really bothers me, because I have gotten to know a lot of people with sex offenses. And I'll tell you what, we over-criminalize sex offenses and those types of things. And they are the most impacted, most marginalized individuals. And so whenever I approach advocacy, I'm always thinking about my friends with sex offenses, because if it's going to help them, then it's going to help the rest of us. And so I think the culture change comes through authentic conversations. And so that's why I started Civil Survival. It's my hope to get all of those people with a variety of experiences up into the legislative, into the capital of our state, to speak with all the different legislators, because some will connect with others in different ways. We have some libertarian, conservative, people who have sex offenses, but maybe they'll be able to connect with their Republican legislator, but that's how you start to change the culture, is to really, get everybody into these conversations, so that's, yeah.
And if I could add to that, it's inefficient in a sense to have to, one at a time, call folks out, on it. I mean, and I'm like you, I call people out. If I'm in a room, you're not going to offend me. That's just it. It's like you're not going to use the language. And if I have an opportunity, and especially in rooms like this, I use it to just say, just as a reminder, it's a friendly nudge. I was in the White House last year, and a young man who had come out of prison, he kept referring to himself as an inmate, and I was like, oh my God, he was in prison, like he hasn't switched. And so, and I stood up and I said, if we're really sincere about this work, we got to first start with language. So one of the things I feel like we need shared language around this. We do all these campaigns, but we have to have shared language. We're all on social media. We can shift the culture. Yep. It's within our reach. We may not be able to change legislation next year, but we can shift the culture. But it has to be a shared language, some agreements around what we're going to say, how we're going to say, and how we're going to talk about this. And, that's something that under this administration, by the end of it, we can see that happen.
Totally agree. And I think that's a lot of the work that folks in this room and Jail USA is going to be doing over the next 3 years. Is instead of I think we've talked a little bit, and I got your note to open this to questions, but we've talked a little bit like incremental change and culture change are somehow in tension with one another, and I think there's a way to do this work and to do it from the most authentic and organic spaces in tandem. And part of that is about having bold visions for what that looks like and doing some things creatively. And I hope to work with both of you in the future on those efforts. And now, because I imagine the room is buzzing with questions, I'm going to turn it over for Q&A.
Yes, Reggie Smith with the Austin Travis County Reentry Roundtable. I really hold y'all up as models for people like me who have lived experience. I really appreciate what you're doing. Teresa, I just had a conversation over the weekend about what I call upward mobility. because so often we see in the reentry space, folks, you know, they want to help us get a place to live and a job, but maybe we want more. And you talked about that, and I have a hard time, I'm struggling to find the way to frame that narrative. So help me out with that. Try to give me some ideas on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I am focused on just making sure that people live out their potential, period. You know, so the fact that we've been to prison and when you come home, you know, it's just like anything. You come out of college, you come out of high school, you get your first job. But that's just not the end, you know, and I think it's going to take storytelling. I think we have to demonstrate capacity, Reggie, your capacity, my capacity. People have to hear your story. They have to hear my story. They have to hear Bill's story. And then they have to hear some of our friends' story who have different types of crime. And they've got to see the full gamut, you know, the ugliness of incarceration. And then they have to see the beauty that comes out of it, you know, what we're able to do. And I think that storytelling, you know, is just the way to do that. The reason why I'm stretching myself at 54, like building tech, like what is my problem? You know, like the statistics, forget incarceration. Women, black, building tech. Now I am formally incarcerated. So I'm just insane, is what I've determined. Like, prison really made me crazy.
Right.
But I'm pushing the boundaries because if you don't see it, you can't become it. And somebody has to be the first to do different things. And so we have to show who we are and show the variety of what we can do. We've got to sit on boards. And companies have to be okay with saying, you know, this is their past.
Thank
You kind of spoke to it, my sister, but there's a quote by an indigenous sister. It says that if you come here to save me, don't waste your time. If you come because my liberation is tied with yours, let's get to work. And so can you speak to, either one of y'all, can you speak to like how this is an intersectional movement? That a lot of times criminal justice is put in a silo and not coupled with housing justice or racial justice or justice for women, but yet, you know, this has to be an intersectional movement. So when we talk about shared language, when we talk about, you know, putting folks who are most impacted at the center and in leadership, it has to be across the board.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know, this is a racial justice problem. It is, like Bill said yesterday, the criminal justice system is rooted in racism. It was created because of racism. And so you cannot approach this work without looking through it through a racial justice lens. There are other issues like women, you know, that have experienced incarceration. We already have, you know, experienced the problems with the white patriarchal system that we live in. So we obviously have some separate issues. There's, you know, so that's why I'm a part of, and I think Teresa is too, the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. You know, and we work on, you know, issues that are specific to women, like getting tampons in prison, you know. So, I mean, I think there are so many different ways that the work intersects with other organizations, you know. So I go to, you know, showing up for racial justice so I can learn to be a good white ally. And through that, I've been able to get that whole group to adopt criminal justice reform as a priority, right? You know, so it definitely intersects on a variety of other issues.
Plus, it, you know, like what you said, it's housing. I mean, it's a poverty issue.
Yeah.
You know, so if you start to break down poverty and all the ways people are impacted by poverty, that speaks to this population that for many people, when they come home, they're homeless. The fact that you can live with your mom or sleep on someone's sofa, you know, and if you were a young person, they might call it couch surfing. But at the end of the day, you don't have your own home. You know, and you don't have the ability to go get a home. And potentially, when you go to apply for a house or an apartment or a lease, the box is going to be there, and you might, you know, not be able to do that as well. It's a food justice issue. I mean, so this is attached and rooted in all of our community issues that we have that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I'm just going to piggyback on that, even though this question wasn't for me. But
Look,
but I think you're absolutely right, Jay. That a lot of the work has been siloed, it's siloed within the criminal justice movement, and then the other issues are siloed from it. And for me, and I think I'm speaking for Just Leadership now, employment is just a wedge issue to take on a broader system of structural inequality that informs and begets mass incarceration, over-criminalization, and over-policing of low-income communities of color. And I think we absolutely cannot solve the criminal justice issue without looking at the ways that people are barred from housing, barred from higher education, the issues of education systems more generally, the inefficiencies of our public school system, and the degradation of our public school system through charter schools, right? So those are all issues that we should be talking about alongside criminal justice reform. I think we have time for one more question. I'm putting that on you.
I'm going to be extremely vulnerable, so yeah, I'll try not to cry. My name is Josh Stickler. I'm from Just City in Memphis. And I have the privilege of being in rooms like this quite often and hearing conversations like this about intersectionality and about the importance of the work being led by the people most affected by it. I'm a 42-year-old white man, lawyer. I've had opportunity crammed down my throat my entire life. Right? Like that's the difference between the hashtag and my life. And so I promise I'm not asking you to help me deal with my white guilt, which is significant. But when I hear this, a lot of times I hear, you can't lead that organization that you're trying to lead. And that hurts. Not asking you to deal with that. That's between me and my therapist. But at the end of the day, so much of this is about policy. And in a lot of these issues, these systems that we've built that are political, that are cultural, that are societal, I can impact that change very well with my 42-year-old whiteness. So what do you say to a guy, not about my white guilt, please, but about just the work, like doing the work, going to Nashville, Tennessee, and advocating for this, for that, as a white man with an organization that has a very diverse board of directors, but is white, because I'm the face. What do you say?
Go ahead. I would say that there is definitely a role for you in this movement. I would say that being a good white ally means that you take leadership, though, from the most impacted. You said you have a diverse board, right? So, when you're in policy discussions and you're sitting there talking about the policies, that you take direction from the people that are most impacted there. But you have a tremendous amount of opportunity based on your status to go and reach certain key stakeholders that maybe I can't or Teresa can't, right? When I talk about certain members of our legislature, I know who is best to go talk to that person, and it's not me. And so you definitely have a key role in the movement. It's just that we would want you to be accountable to the most impacted in discussing what is going to be the most helpful for them. And not to create an idea in your head about what's most helpful and then run with it. But really to be constantly in communication with the people most impacted to come up with the solution. And then be real and be like, look, I've got these assets, I've got white privilege, I maybe can connect with other men more easily. What would you like me to do? And take direction and be vulnerable like that, and you'll be winning all the way.
And if I could just add to that, I think all of us have privilege, and we have to treat our privilege like currency. We have to borrow it, and we have to lend it at times when it's necessary. When I went to prison, I wasn't marginalized as a black woman until I went to prison. So while I sat in prison, I took my privilege of the fact that I had grew up in suburban America, and I listened to the women who had not. And for women who didn't have a mother, I lended being a mother to them. I, for the first time, might have been the first person who said, "You're amazing. You could do this." sex work wasn't your chosen, wasn't your chosen profession. It was just what you felt like you had to do in that moment. What are your dreams? What are your goals? So I think that we have to look at our privilege and determine how best do we use it, how best do we leverage it for each other and for this movement.
Hey Megan, can I make Sharon and the events team mad by asking one last question?
Oh, please.
Okay. Is there a mic or usually I'm not accused of being quiet, but I'm sick, so my projection is limited right now. I want to ask something that hasn't been asked, and I think it needs to be said. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of someone who has gone through what I'm about to describe. This is not a hypothetical, but what would you guys say to those of us in this room who are allies who do this work from a policy perspective and want to do it with you guys and endeavor to do that, but who sometimes are told, I don't really think you want to include a person with XYZ type of record because that's too risky, or we can't put someone up on that stage who is going to not be the safe, non face that we think should be the one that people can relate to. How do we navigate that as people who want to do the right thing and get that we need to be having hard conversations and not painting ourselves into a corner, but who might be dealing with the political and kind of other small p political and other kinds of restrictions and realities that come with working with organizations that are not comprised of just the kinds of people in this room?
Well, that was a hard question, so we're glad it's last. So, I think one, there's probably not a one answer. And I think that's kind of the hard part of all of this. We look for one answer to solve all of our problems. So I think that there's some times when you probably have to go with that. But what you can do is, if you take me in a room and I'm a safer bet, tell me what, give me the ammunition. Tell me, you're going to we need to bring in these other issues. So allow your safer bet, maybe in some cases, to go in the room with you, but load them up so that, they can slip in and we can start seeding, the groundwork for other times. And then I think, we have to use wisdom and also know that there are times when we just have to be bold and just have to step out. And, discerning, when to go softer or when to go harder is just, something that we're going to have to, play it by ear and then share some of our best practices of what has worked.
Yeah, I would say, today I'm here in DC. Yesterday, Nick Allen and I are part of this LFO consortium in Washington State. And while we were watching his LFO panel, folks from my organization were speaking at this Supreme Court Minority and Justice Commission about the impact of court fines on them. And there's people on that panel who are currently homeless, don't have teeth, and they don't present like me. But you know what? I guarantee you that was the most powerful moment. And so, don't always think that people need to look like us to come up here. I tell you, people that are real and that are in the middle of their struggle will get the hearts and minds of more elected officials, more policymakers, and we shouldn't be ashamed. We should be propping them up because that's who really is impacted by this issue.
And can I just add one thing? I think there's also, we're all in this room together, right? So there is a way in which collaborative efforts and coalition building can be an important part of that. So CAP might not be able to be the pit bull in the room, but JLUSA can. And there's a way of understanding how different organizations can leverage and push and pull, that I think is something that we can begin to use and develop in ways as we expand the impacted leadership in this space and what that leadership looks like. So we are over time, so I'm going to thank my lovely panelists.
Folks, bear with me one more second so I can give you some feedback about where you're going next. So now we have the last 2 breakout sessions for all of us wonks who want to know detailed stuff about stuff. So here is what the panels are and where they will be held. So this first session that starts immediately hereafter, when we open the door and try to leave some cooler air in this room. Transformative practices promoting access to record clearing around the country. It's another way of saying my colleague Jamie's expungement toolkit, as we've called it. That will be in this room. Tools for launching successful occupational licensing reform campaigns will be in Logan, which is the room right next door to this when you go down the hall. And enforcing background check protections will be in DuPont, which is all the way down at the end of the hall. So that's where we are now. And the moderators of the first set of breakouts, please remember what I'm about to tell you, so at the end of the session you can remind people where to go for the next one. Taking the case to the courts and boards to challenge licensing barriers will be, again, in this room. How to bring clean slate to your state will be in Logan. And the great equalizer, clearing the way for education and training, will be in DuPont. Now I suppose this room is called the Scott room. So we may, I suppose there might be a need to adjust this if we find that our self-selection makes the rooms not fit right, but that's the plan. So we'll go with it. So again, for right now, if you want to hear about promoting access to record clearing around the country, stay here. If you want to hear about tools for launching successful occupational and licensing reform campaigns, go to the next room, Logan. For enforcing background checks, go to the end of the hall. Thanks.
Hey, good morning.